welcome everybody. Thank you for being here and joining our panel. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Maria Paula Loayza, or MP for short. I'm the Transformation Officer at Innova Schools Mexico. Innova Schools is the largest K-12 school network in Latin America, and we're working to bring high-quality education at a low cost for the middle class in the region. I'm very excited to be here and joining this panel and just getting to know these amazing leaders. So to get us started, I wanted to give each one of you the opportunity to introduce yourselves and introduce your companies. And then maybe as you're doing so, just tell us a little bit about how you got started in the world of education or EdTech, and maybe what was your aspiration or your purpose, and what was the impact that you wanted to bring?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, MP. My name's Catherine. I am the President and Chief Operating Officer of Amplify Education. Amplify creates K-12 core and supplemental instruction, assessment and intervention programs, which we distribute now to about 14 million students in K-12 in public school districts across the country. I joined Amplify in 2015, and that was my first role in education. For my sins, I was an investment banker. I worked in television. I worked in kind of consumer technology. So I don't have your kind of typical background for an executive coming into education. But so throughout my career, I have basically worked sort of in industries and for companies that are undergoing significant change, and usually worked on the side of the disruptor. And when I joined Amplify, Amplify is trying to change K-12 education through high-quality instruction, combining that with a kind of digital-forward learning experience for students that has the potential to really drive student outcomes. And I think they are the disruptor. We've grown a lot, 40% per year for the last 6 years now. And in 2015, I saw just the beginnings of that potential for growth and potential for change, and I wanted to be part of that. So I joined Amplify. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Pierre. I'm the co-founder and the CEO of OpenClassrooms. I started OpenClassrooms a long time ago, kind of an unusual journey because I started in middle school to create online courses with my co-founder. So it was not a business. We created the courses we wish we had in class. Back in the day, 20 years ago, there were no MOOCs or open courses or video content for what it's worth on the internet. So we started creating online courses for free to teach coding in French-speaking countries, started the business in France, and then moved to the States a few years ago. So it's been kind of a big hobby for 10 years. Kind of a similar mindset as like Khan Academy, if you will, or Code Academy. So we're teaching coding in French. So it became the reference platform to learn coding in French. And then at the end of our studies, about a little bit more than 10 years ago, we decided to make it our full-time job, and we built OpenClassrooms as it's known today. It's a mission-driven company. Our mission is to make education accessible, education leading to jobs. So effectively, it's an education to employment platform. We became an accredited college in Europe. We're also on our journey to become one in the States. So we're trained. We have curriculum, technology, and then we place students in the workforce. So that's essentially upskilling, reskilling, and apprenticeship we sell to employers and governments.
Thanks. Hello, Mike Malefakis with Emeritus. And Emeritus is a company you might not have heard of, but we're reaching about 250,000 learners a year across the globe. And we work in higher education. We're an enabler, an accelerant for great universities trying to open access and affordability for the very best education in the world to South, East, West, every country in the world. I guess I got involved with Emeritus when I used to run executive education at Columbia Business School, and this was in the 2010, 2011 period when it was very clear that we needed to do something radically different, but we didn't have the resources to do it differently inside Columbia. and I was looking for great partners to work with. Ended up experimenting with about 7 online providers, of which 2 worked out great. The other 5 were wonderful learning experiences, but a lot of sweat equity was invested and not much return for that sweat equity. Emeritus happened to be the one that worked the best. Later moved on to Wharton, continued to work with Emeritus. And then after about 25 years of having worked with great universities like Chicago and Guy in Latin America and the University of Michigan, as well as Wharton and Columbia, I became frustrated with the excellence that we provided in these universities, but the lack of access, the lack of scope, the lack of scale. And I was always trying to push for greater acceptance of reach and broad reach and lowering price points so that people could have this excellent education. After beating my head against the wall many decades in higher ed, I decided to jump over to the faster moving ed tech side and joined the great Emeritus team. And I want to say one noticeable difference, this is about culture, is higher education, particularly the elite schools, is all about prove your point and critiquing each other constantly so that the best idea is raised to the top, but there is very little room for iterative experimentation, which is so necessary if we're going to be growing fast and scale. I love working with colleagues who have a growth mindset and who embrace iterative experimentation and 3-box models of pushing for constant innovation, and I didn't feel that in higher education. So as an enabler for great schools that I used to work for, that's what we do at Emeritus.
Hi, I'm Steve Ritter. I'm founder and chief scientist at Carnegie Learning. We're a curriculum provider in K-12, primarily in mathematics, English language arts, and world languages. And we focus on using AI to personalize instruction for every student. My background's actually in cognitive psychology. We started the company 25 years ago now, spun out of Carnegie Mellon University as part of a research project. So the origins of the company were in trying to study how people learn, building computer models of how people learn. I had a background in AI. We were building AI systems that sort of learned along with the student so that they could give feedback to the student as they solve problems and show their work. It was successful enough as a research project that we had 25 school districts who were using the curriculum to teach math out of the university. And so we sort of like backed into starting a company because we needed to support this and continue the work. I'll just say, like, one of the things I was most surprised about in moving from kind of more academic work on studying how people learn to applying it in the education field was how little thought there was of education from the student's perspective, which is what we were doing. The education field tends to think about institutions, teachers, materials, all those kinds of things, which are all important. But from our perspective, we really focused on what is this material, activity, experience, how does that change the student's brain, right? Because if it doesn't make a change in the student's brain, the student isn't learning. So that's kind of the origin of the company, and we'll talk about the culture of how we continue to try and innovate and understand more about how students think and learn.
Great, thank you, everybody. So maybe to get us started with the topic of growing, right, and scaling our businesses, maybe Catherine, we can start with you. What's a significant challenge that you faced while scaling, and how did you overcome it?
So I'm going to be a little countercultural here. You framed this as a sort of scaling an education technology company. We had to get into print. I think we serve K-12 classrooms. They are very much classrooms that are looking still very much for a blended experience, both a kind of print-based experience as well as a digital experience. We had initially, in sort of the early years, really created very digital-centric kind of core curriculum programs. They were just a little bit too ahead of where the market actually was. And so, we had to develop fast an equally engaging and kind of rigorous print-based experience that got us into the the fun of managing a big supply chain activity. And last year we shipped 50 million books. So being an ed tech company is also being a print company at some level. So I'd say that was sort of number one. I think the other one is the single biggest challenge, I think, for most, kind of ed tech companies, which is how do you scale distribution? And, we have very, very deliberately sort of invested in creating a sales force that reaches, every corner of the country. It is a tough sales cycle, complicated in K-12 with a lot of decision makers. Your decision makers are not your users. And I think we've really been sort of successful in part because we have really focused on building that sales force and also sort of not building them to the hundreds and hundreds of folks that you see, some of the bigger players, but being really tactical about, how to invest in those boots on the ground, how to power them up with the right sort of information, use digital marketing, kind of nurture their leads. So we've been really deliberate, I think, at sort of building our distribution, and that's the big barrier I think you have to get over to really scale in K-12.
Mike, I wanted to get your input a little bit more on this topic, because when we first talked about this, you shared a reflection with me of how the strategic choices that you make to scale when you're first starting, right, maybe a Series A or Series B round, are very different to those that you're making now. Can you share a little bit more with the audience about that reflection and how maybe your decisions have evolved over time and over the maturity of your company?
Sure. I think this is going back to, the adage that all of us have heard about what got you here, wherever you are in your life journey, and not just professionally, but your life journey, is not what's going to get you to the next stage. In the sense that we all as individuals have to continue to evolve, have to continue to upskill, have to continue to learn, have to continue to embrace a growth mindset, or the consequences is we may watch TV and go down a YouTube channel for the rest of our lives. I don't know what that is. But likewise for organizations, I think it's really important that the great success that many startups have in years 1 or 2, those that do have a lot of success, you start to embed this amazing mindset of cohesion among this core team that's done amazing things together. And once you start to really scale, so say you're reaching 10,000 learners or students, and you're quickly scaling up to 100,000 or 200,000, those exponential growths are going to necessitate a couple of things. New people joining the team, so talking about how you keep that core culture relevant as a center point, but also embracing new insights, getting new skills, and letting go of the past. And that's a really critical part. So in Emeritus, we basically use VG from Darden, from Tuck, his model of a 3-box model, which is basically box 1 is focus on the present, try to get operational excellence in what you're doing today and your core business. Box 2 is letting go of the past. What are those anchors that are keeping you anchored to something that might have been a great solution a year ago? And this is going to be more relevant in the age of AI. It may be only 6 months ago in the age of AI. And then box 3 is keeping a vision to that sort of experimental platform of where you're going and understand that there are many routes to get there. So iterative experimentation, and make sure, particularly at the sort of strategic level of the company, that people are spending a lot of time thinking about the future, because you can get sucked into the day-to-day pressures so easily. So guard that time for looking to the future. Be very deliberate about forgetting and de-anchoring from the past. I think those are critical elements.
So as the company grows, it evolves, but in EdTech, it feels like education and technology is constantly and very rapidly evolving. So Steve, I wanted to ask you, is there a moment in the story of the company that you can think about where you had to pivot or change the approach that you were having to make sure that you were actually meeting your customer needs?
Yeah. The obvious example is the pandemic, where obviously students were learning at home. One of the initiatives that we started before the pandemic was working with augmented reality. So our software, as students are working on the software, they're generating data. What we wanted to do was give teachers kind of augmented reality goggles so they could kind of look out over the classroom and have indicators of which students were struggling. And you have reports kind of pinned to the wall and augmented reality, and it's a great vision for a classroom. And it's a lousy vision when the students are not physically in the same space. And so what we ended up doing was pivoting and using that kind of same data model and same indicators of student struggle and implemented them as a web-based dashboard. And it sounds like in some ways a simple transition, but it was complicated by the fact that the notion of a class changed too. So normally, students in a single class are working together at the same time. But what happened over the pandemic was we started to see a much broader time series. Students from a particular class wouldn't necessarily be doing the work all at the same time. So we had to kind of change it where a teacher could look at multiple classes at a single time and sort of be able to intervene with individual students, as well as sort of notification systems where if teachers could understand like when students were logged on because they were kind of working at all times of the day and things like that. So, yeah.
Pierre, in your case, you were telling us how you started in French-speaking countries and then now you've taken, of course, a platform globally. What were some things that you guys had to adapt to make sure that you were catering to the needs of different parts of the world?
So we started as a very B2C platform with a freemium model. Over time, we realized that to fulfill our mission, to make education accessible, at first, we didn't really have high entry barriers in terms of admissions. We didn't even have admissions, so it was direct admissions in the sense that anybody could really get in our programs, which means also they had to pay themselves, which is in itself a barrier to accessibility. So we started thinking about financial accessibility in education, so making education financially accessible. So that means finding financial backers to help students or lifelong learners access education. So they could be employers or gov agencies at some level. They all have requirements and eligibility requirements and so on. So we started shifting from a very open B2C model to something with an admissions, an application, enrollment, criteria, eligibility, and so on. And now we're more in the world of, I would say, orientation. So helping a student before the education program to figure out what they truly want to do or what they need and how they can access to certain financial aid. So that was like a big pivot in the company a couple of years ago, going from B2C to B2B, B2G. Now most of our revenue is made in B2B. And then the more recent one is after the training. After the training, we're all about placing students in the workforce, either for first job or salary increase, mobility, switching careers. Last year, we placed 52,000 students in the workforce, one way or the other. And now we're building, more technology and more services around placing students at scale, which is essentially kind of a talent and job marketplace and matching algorithm to help them find the job they want and they need within the employer they're already in or outside. So those are kind of the two main moments in time, one where we started to develop more relationship in B2B and B2G and extend the product before training and now after training.
Just a follow-up question to that, because you've shared sort of like big evolutions in the company, right? Starting as a B2C and then all of the other things. What was your role as a leader within the company in supporting the team that works in the company going through all of these transitions?
It's a good question. I think when we scale, so we're about 300 employees. Obviously, we started from zero. We were two founders. So at some point, we hired a lot of people. We I think a couple of years ago, what we did well was defining the mission, the values, the vision of the company, kind of the high-level framework or why we are here. Did that in a very kind of meaningful way and embedded our principles, which are of four, like we care, we dare, we tell it as it is, we persist, in our HR processes, meaning in the recruitment processes, in the way we assess, we review, we promote, etc., the way we communicate. So they were really embedded and ingrained in the DNA of the company. So I think defining the culture was definitely instrumental to allowing kind of a successful growth. And I think, to all the points already made, letting go the past and sometimes bringing new leaders with new ideas, making sure that what we're building right now is not just a bigger replica of what we did in the past, which means that myself or my team need to adapt our own growth journey this way, meaning needing to learn new skills and do new stuff and let go of things we've done in the past and where we're super successful, but that's not what is asked of us now.
I want to keep going deeper into culture. And Mike, I wanted to hear what your definition of culture is. And then Pierre was talking about how they work to define culture. How much do you think culture is something that you design and you work on? And how much is it just the people and individuals that are part of the company that shape it?
Yes, and in the sense that it is obviously culture is organic, and a PowerPoint presentation on our culture. I mean, how many of the legacy companies in the world have these wonderful posters on their halls talking about, we'll climb the peaks together, we'll do this and that. I think culture really, to be effective, has to be seen in behavior. And I think a big part of culture, and this is again contrasting my many years in academia versus my few years in sort of an ed tech company, is defining what not to do. Like what are those red lines that you don't cross? And for one example, we are a kinder culture in an ed tech. We're more forgiving of mistakes, of failures, as long as we learn from those mistakes and failures. And because of the pressures to publish in peer-reviewed journals in academia, that's not the case there. So I think defining what your goals are as a culture is really critical, but also defining sort of those third rails that you cannot touch, where if somebody offends the culture, that should be addressed. Because you don't need too many, and just in the many organizations I've worked for over the years, a toxic individual can have a profound effect on the culture if that toxic individual is senior enough. And so for however small your organization is or large, remember, those are the people, again, those are the third rails that you have to work against. And I think that collective effort, I'm more of, tend to, you can have an alpha culture of hard-charging, driving individuals who drive a lot of growth. But I think for the long term, a more cohesive collective culture, this is my own bias, is one that's going to drive longer-term value and longer-term growth, particularly in mission-driven companies. And I think that's critical. So again, I always find that a very interesting interplay between hiring the best person in their field, but are they somebody who may be toxic versus somebody who might not be quite as experienced, has the right attitude, and can meld into your culture more closely.
Steve, would you give us some examples of some of these behaviors that Mike's talking about that you feel have enabled the growth of your company?
Sure. I have to say, I'll start with a little story because I sort of have a trigger warning. When you ask for definition of culture, when I was in 7th grade, my social studies teacher made us every day recite the definition of culture, which is an organized system of learned behavior that is the total way of life of a people. If you ask anybody from my 7th grade social studies class to this day, they will know that. So that's the official definition. How you build that in a company, so one example that we do is one of our values is innovation. And it relates to something Mike was saying about like not letting your, not anchoring yourself to kind of ways of doing things, right? And so innovation is about taking risks. And so we developed a quarterly innovation award that we call the First Pancake Award. And it comes from the idea that your first pancake never really works out perfectly. The pan's a little too hot or too cold or didn't use enough butter, you know, things like that. So, but it helps you build the second pancake, right? Because you learn what temperature you need, and the second pancake hopefully works out better. So we award this innovation award to somebody who took an initiative, tried something, and it didn't work out, but ideally they learned from it, or we learned from it. And so that's one example of a practice where not only are we putting the values on the wall, but we're kind of recognizing that. And particularly, I think that one's particularly important because we're recognizing something that wouldn't classically be seen as a success or something that you're necessarily proud of, right? Something you tried that didn't work out, so.
That's a great story. Do any other of you want to share another behavior that you think has been key in your growth?
I would just say we have a sort of culture of change. I think when you are setting out to achieve some spectacular and ambitious things, and you're successful in growing very fast, you sort of create culture by default. It sort of happens along the way. And I think one of the strengths of Amplify has been this ability to adapt and change with each kind of phase of sort of growth. We've integrated multiple acquisitions. We've sort of tripled or even quadrupled in size over the last 5 years. So, sort of the people, the culture around our people has sort of had to evolve as we have sort of gone through each of these sort of different phases. I think we're sort of at that point now where we need to deliberately design the culture. And it's, to the point of many of the comments, that's not just a kind of question of your values and your purpose. It's sort of, what are your practices? What do you norm around? What are the sort of set of behaviors? How are decisions taken? How do you communicate with each other? It's sort of what you do all the time. And I think as you grow, you get surer about what that culture should be, but it's a constant work in progress to sort of actually live it and sort of define it and redefine it and sort of iterate on it. So I think we have a culture change. We're always students and looking to sort of adapt as we kind of face each challenge.
Mike.
I've really enjoyed joining Emeritus in part for the mosaic of cultures we have. So we've got about 1,000 people in India. We have about 150 in the US, about 250 in Latin America, and sort of groups of 50 in the Middle East, 50 in Europe and the UK, 50 in ASEAN, Singapore, Asia, and then sort of about 75 in China. Layering on top of that, we have the cultures of the tech people. We have the cultures of those of us who came from academia. We have the culture of the instructional designers. And communication is the central thread to sort of having those different backgrounds work very well together. And clearly I'm not a founder, but having founders who live and breathe the culture themselves and set the example is critical, because sometimes it happens that founders get so sucked into maybe talking to the financiers or talking to whomever it may be, that they sort of leave the tribe, if you will, their tribe, and forget about that necessity of coming back in, communicating, having, if it's a virtual coffee talk, with groups of people. And just the mosaics of culture is really interesting, and it's our strength. And I think most of our organizations have to deal with that aspect as well.
I just echo that. I think it's easy to think that you can lead by example just by example, right? But you really need to be very deliberative about how you communicate. If you want to transmit the culture, how you communicate exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it, so other people see it and understand it. So I think that's a really important point.
Pierre, I wanted to go back to you. There's a few things that people have mentioned that I just wanted to ask you. So Catherine mentioned things like decision-making, which I think not everybody might think that that's also part of culture, right? But when you first start a company, basically you're making all of the decisions, right? But then as you grow and as you're bringing new people into the team, you're distributing decision-making. And that must be a big change for somebody that just started the company, right? And then the other thing is the role that you might play as a role model for culture. So what's been your experience in these years with OpenClass and how it's grown and the team that you've built?
Yeah, I think decision-making is actually highly cultural, and principles, the mission, and so on are normally tools to help deciding. The tough decisions are typically the ones where you're like, yeah, it's kind of a 50-50 chance between A and B, or 60-40, and we don't have all of the data, but I need to take this decision like right away and not wait on it. It's hard. If it was easy, then we would already have picked one of the two solutions. So we see cultures and principles and so on as a way, as a tool to decide. Minutes of our meeting in which we would decide on a specific solution would be like, solution A would mean that we dare more, because this is one of our key principles, where solution B would mean this and that. So back to your point, I think having also clear boundaries of what you do or don't do and what kind of behaviors you shouldn't have has been very helpful. And I think to the point of culture being a role model and how you nurture the right culture, I've got two examples in mind. I think events that were kind of pivotal in our journey towards like growing the culture. One is we hired top execs sometimes, or just individuals as well. Sometimes who were brilliant, but brilliant jerks. And we had one of them actually at the highest level in the C-suite was absolutely, super efficient, super productive, very bright, did a really good job, but was treating us/me upward really well and treating people downward very badly. And I think it was a really key moment in the sense that the team looked up at me saying, what are you going to do? Are you going to double down on budget and targets and goals and performance? Or are you going to do something about it? And fast forward, long story short, we try to like alleviate and change behaviors and so on. Didn't work out. I let her go, and that was a big pivotal moment in our story for the culture of the team to see that we took somebody like this out for reasons that we explained in a respectful way, but clearly for cultural principles. I think that is a key example on how we try to nurture culture. Another example is also a difficult one, which is like 1 or 2 years ago when market changed, our team became too big for the size of the business and the type of growth and so on. So we had to lay people off. And I think the way we did it had everything to do with culture. And we've all read headlines from Saul Corporation, like laying people off in a 5-minute Zoom call with 1,000 people. Horrible, experiences obviously for employees. I think again the way you drive those like key moments, good and bad, are really pivotal to your culture. And weirdly, we laid people off, and it stayed as kind of a key moment in the culture of the company where we did it well. Like it's considered internally and externally as, oh, actually you can do that. It's painful, but you can do it well. Which honestly was my first time I laid like collectively a lot of people. So it was not a given, honestly, especially in Europe where labor laws are a little bit trickier. So those two experiences, I think, are good examples for me.
Yeah, I love those examples, and I think for me the big takeaway today in terms of culture is just how having a culture very well defined and your cultural principles at heart can really just make decision making so much easier, and just even just facing the tough moments that a company goes through a lot easier for everybody, not just the leaders.
Can I just add? I think though one of the real challenges, particularly for companies in education, is sort of maintaining the strength of the culture, but the sort of diversity of the viewpoints and the sort of plurality of opinions within your organization. So you don't create a sort of an orthodoxy that makes it just challenging to really meet the needs of your customers wherever they are, in whatever local community they are, and kind of do what's right for the students. And I think this is a real challenge for us in K-12 education in particular, is just as the world is sort of fragmenting around us, becoming more political, a lot of legislation sort of dictating what can be taught in classrooms, is just how do you maintain a culture internally where you can have a debate, where you can have some discourse, when you can have a plurality of views. And I think this is a challenge for everybody to think about how you create a culture where that is where debate is acceptable.
Could I jump on that, Catherine? I think that's so important in this chaotic world we're living in, again, for the political divide that we have. If you can create a culture where people say, this is a place I feel rewarded and I feel accepted and it is safe, it is so critical for performance on the individual and team level when we're in an increasingly divided world. Just, yes.
Thank you. So we just have a few more minutes left. So I want to do a quick closing lighting round and just hear what are some of your thoughts and reflections around the current landscape of EdTech and the evolution of technology, and maybe share what you think the single most exciting innovation is that's going to shape the future of education.
I'll start. So I'll say clearly AI is changing everything and very rapidly. So surprisingly, we're starting to see schools very welcoming of AI-based innovations. They're not afraid of it. They want to kind of lean into it because it's not only changing the way that we teach, but it's changing the world that the students are going to live in. And so thinking about like how that world changes and what students really need to succeed once they get out of school is really important. So thinking about both of those sides of AI, I think, is really important.
I think there's going to be echoes of AI down the line, but the promise of adaptive learning and personalized learning, we've been talking about it for several decades now, and I'm really excited. I feel very self-conscious. You're an expert, and you actually build these things. I'm just opining. But the AI will actually allow us within 4 or 5 years to get to a level of personalized adaptive learning that it's taking us decades to envision but not get there yet. So really excited about that element.
I'll take a slightly different angle, which is adaptive to employers' needs at a very granular level. I think in the coming years, notably AI, but not only, I think will enable analyzing in real time the actual employer's needs, which could be like a job posting. I'm a small business in San Diego, I'm hiring a cybersecurity analyst. I want this and that skill. How can a training provider, local college, fulfill that local need, very specific, granular need, in real time, and say, hey, I've got 3 students matching that description. Maybe they like 1 or 2 skills. I'm going to add that training program on top of that and serve them to employers in a very short loop. Right now, it's only been very high level and multi-year processes. Like, oh, companies want to hire software developers. We're going to build a program. It's going to take us years. How can we bring that at the granular level?
Again, be a little countercultural here. The thing I'm most excited about is the shift towards quality. Like in the last few years, I think that is the one of the things that has really emerged, that an ability to really select the kind of programs that bring the kind of potential for real change, that represent, in that sense, high quality, that are research-backed. And I think with technology powering up that quality, the ability to really measure their effect and then hold the programs accountable for the success of the students and what they learn through their programs. And it's a marriage of sort of quality and technology that will make that possible and sort of power up the kind of social and cognitive work sort of in the core classrooms that make a difference. So it's not about AI necessarily, and it's certainly not about, I think, technology replacing great teaching and great learning, but working in service of that and with the kind of quality that can really change the outcomes.
Thank you. So our time's up. I just wanted to thank the four of you for these very inspiring, amazing panel, and all of you for joining us today. They will be outside if you want some questions to be answered. And yeah, we're done. Thank you. Bye.